Right, we've been working on the suspension of the new Hacky. And typically when you set up suspensions, you might have leaf springs or maybe something like this where you've got a shock absorber with a coilover. And they're great. They can be used in a variety of applications, but for the Hackies, really, what you're trying to do is minimize weight. Now, this isn't too heavy, but you've got to add on to that having wishbones and a whole support system. So I've been trying to think about what suspension I want and how much ultimately travel I want. So I've come up with not really a full suspension system, but more providing some compliance to the front end. The way I'm going to do it is these types of bushes. Now you can get them in a variety of lengths. They're sold on AliExpress, and you can see there's inside there's a metal insert surrounded by rubber, surrounded by a metal insert. And the idea with these is that they go into a shaft here. So you bolt through there. So the bottom bit in this case will be supporting this shaft. A bolt will be through there and be something else. So what we've got here is a plate with the supports on. This plate will be welded to the front section of the Hacky. So that serves two purposes. One, it's going to provide me with some support for the axle itself, plus it's going to provide some sort of torsional rigidity into this section, because without this section it's just really a big box shape out of 20mm square box. So you need to stiffen it up. So as well as I'm going to stiffen up the corners here, I'm also going to use this to solve two purposes. One is it's going to support the front axle, and two, it's going to provide some rigidity into there. Talking about the front axle, here's the front axle, and you can see it's got the placement for those bushes. What would happen is here you can see the hubs will bolt through those, so the hubs can sit there, and this will be supported this way, so it will sit like something like that. So you can see how that would sit, and the idea is we'll place that there, the axle goes underneath, and then the axle essentially is suspended from here, which is part of the overall chassis of the Hacky. And I've worked to make sure that the height of the centre line of the front hubs is the same as the height of the centre line of the back hubs, keeping the rest of the frame parallel. So that was a bit of fun in terms of making sure everything fitted. I do a few things as well when I'm making up Hackies that I like to do. So if I just move this across, you can see here's a little dimple. So that's a drill mark. It's just got a bit of Sharpie in at the moment, but that's quite handy because a lot of the time you're cleaning the metal. You see here, areas which have been cleaned. So I'm cleaning the metal, and if you just write on it all the time, like here, then half the time you rub it off, where if you put a dimple in there, that provides a very clear indication of where it is. So that drill hole there is in the center line of the axle. So if I line it up with a dimple, do the same there, clamp it up, weld, then I know I'm pretty good. I will still measure and check that center line still matches the back end of the Hacky, etc. But it was just helpful really in getting that initial setup before you weld everything together and then realise, no, it didn't quite align how you were expecting things to go as well. If we just have another look at the axle as well, we'll talk about some of this, because it's not all just a straight angle. So you can see here, that angle there is about 8 degrees, which matches that angle there almost. So what I've done is just to exaggerate this, rather than that line there, which you see as the centre line being totally horizontal, is it comes up about 2 degrees, and that's just to help some of the handling. And as we move around here as well, you can see that this is not parallel to that. Again, that's deliberate. That's to try and provide some of that, ultimately trying to provide some caster and camber to make the steering self-centered a little bit better, and also provide better geometry when you're driving. There's lots of science behind this. I've found these angles having about 8 degrees that way. In this case, sorry, it weren't 8, it's more like 10, just to give that little bit angle there. Worked quite well for Hacky. You could play some more, I'm sure, but most of the time you're bouncing around on grass, so there's limited returns that you can make on there. So next step for this will be just finishing welding up. So at the moment it's tacked together. I've just got to really now wire brush everything, clean the tacks up, blast away with the welder, make sure everything's really firm on both that and this piece while it's separate, and then I can weld this on after I've made sure everything's in line, and that'll be that. The holes in there are, well, you could argue they're decorative, but in this case they are to add a little bit of lightness. It's arguable how much lightness truly they add, but it's free. The air doesn't weigh anything. It's free in the bill of materials, so I always put a few in, because this is, so at the end of the day, 60mm by, it might be 4 or 5 millimeters. So it's bigger than it needs to be, which is fine, which allows me to take out some of the extra weight that otherwise I'd be carrying around in my Hacky. And given that this Hacky is about trying to take weight out of the previous design, then I feel that's worth having a go at. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.